Welcome back to another episode of Adulting Unplugged. I'm your host, Tracy Baconhaster, and today we're diving deep into a topic that's near and dear to every parent's heart, communicating with their teenagers. In the dynamic journey of parenting, fostering open and honest dialogue with our adolescents can be a rewarding yet challenging adventure. We know the importance of connecting with our teens, but sometimes it feels like we're speaking different languages. Let me hear you, parents. I know you feel that one, right? That's why today we've invited a special guest to the podcast, someone who's a seasoned expert in the art of bridging the communication gap with teens, Amy Ambrizich. And she is a renowned parenting coach and expert. She does a lot of coaching with step families and kind of helping bridge those communication gaps across all different channels. And so she has all kinds of wonderful, valuable strategies and insights on navigating the complex world of teen communication. And so in this episode, we're going to talk about all the things, all the challenges, the celebrations, the rewards of connecting with your adolescents in meaningful ways. And Amy's going to provide all kinds of wonderful goodies for you guys today. So Amy, let me turn it over to you and let you just kind of introduce yourself to our listeners and tell them a little bit more about you.
Thank you so much. So I'm Amy Ambrizich. I used to be a parenting and step family coach. Now I'm specifically a blended family strategist and coach. So I really work with the beginning to blend couples or those that are within the first 5 to 10 years of blended marriage. But over the decades, I have worked with so many couples. And of course, even with my blended family couples, we talk about those relationships with the kiddos, with the teens, especially because it's such a hard time for everyone. So I've worked within the Worthington School District, teaching the active parenting program. I've done private coaching for almost 2 decades now, which is really crazy when you think about how fast that all goes. So on the personal side, mom of 3 adults, and nana to 1 little granddaughter, and we are officially, as of today, empty nesters ourselves. So things are hopping around here, but this parent and teen challenge can be something that's a topic that every parent wants to talk about, cry about. It's hard. It's a struggle for sure. So I'm so excited to have this conversation with you today, Tracy.
Yes, I'm so excited to have you here because it's so funny. It's like what happens is for whatever reason, it's like, all right, kids hit puberty. And then it's a whole nother language. It's like, oh, I don't know how to talk to my kid anymore. And then they grow out of the teens and they're young adults. And then that communication seems to come back and we're all on the same page again. And it's just, it could be so complicated. And you're like, what is happening? Why can't I get to this kid?
Yes.
And let's be honest, teen years are hard enough on their own. And then trying to communicate with your kid and them just like talking to a wall. It's just like, what is happening? So
Yes.
let's just dive into can you just kind of talk about that importance of open and healthy, I think is a key word there, communication between parents and their teenagers, especially during those teen years?
Well, I think we can anyone who's been around teens or raising teens, you know that it's a time of change and growth for them. Like they've got the hormones flying, they've got social changes within their friend groups. They are growing both physically and emotionally and mentally. So it can be, like you said, we had that really good relationship with our kid, and all of a sudden we're like, what the heck? And who dropped this alien into my home who's got a really nasty attitude? So, but it's not that they're trying to be difficult. They're just going through so many changes, and they're facing some complex decisions at that stage. And their decision-making skills obviously are not well honed just yet. We know, if you go into the brain science, it's about age 25 when the executive decision-making part of the brain actually solidifies. So I always have to remind parents, you're dealing with someone with kind of scrambled eggs in that part of the brain. They're kind of hard, but not quite yet. And, we're just still not sure how to do this. Impulse control we see that with our early teens, especially because they're trying to be adults, but yet they're still kids and they're still working with the kid brain. So they're really having a hard time seeing that long-term result of whatever decisions they're making today. They're very like today, tomorrow, and I can't think about, next week. So and I think really with parents that are raising kids right now, there's so much social pressure. Back in the day, it was that peer pressure in the classroom or whatever. But now with social media, the kids are on the screens all the time. it is hard to be that voice that your kids are hearing all the time because they're hearing all of this other noise on the outside coming in through their screens. So when we talk about having that healthy communication, I've got a million tips and strategies planned for you today, but it's really about staying connected through the chaos and the conflict. And if you can just keep that as the focus, like I have to stay connected to this kid so that I can be that main influence, that voice that they hear even when they're not home. If we can just focus on how do we keep that healthy, then that will get us through the teen years. And yes, they do come back to you as now my kids are all adults, and it's like, and now we have these other kind of conversations again. So, so we will get you there.
Yes. Yes. And I love that you talked about especially on the younger teens. And let's be honest, the whole impact from COVID, I think really impacted a lot of this too, with social skills for students.
Yes.
I'm running an after school program at this charter school. And I was talking to the principal and I asked her, like, what are some of the skills that we really want to make sure we're hitting on? And communication was a huge one, but it came out more in the sense of decision making and them not being able to comprehend those things. They just don't think ahead. They're like, I'm just doing this right now. I'm reacting. And it's like, how do we get them to stop, kind of like pause and think through those decisions? And I think that's part of that communication strategy, is how do we teach them those things? So, I mean, I know we talked about some of those challenges, but I mean, how would you say to start, before we even get into like the tips and strategies, how would you want to create a safe and non-judgmental space for your teenager? Because I think that's important too. You can't just be like yelling at each other, high stress. Like, how do you create a space for them to even start to have good communication and implement the tips you're going to talk about?
It was interesting. Not too long ago, I did a presentation on this exact subject in the Dublin schools, and I asked the parents, like, what is your biggest challenge? I thought they were going to say screen time. I thought they were going to say outside influences. They said time. Time is the hardest. And I was like, well, that's an interesting, let's dig into that. And the more we dug into that, it was really true because, you know, parents are working, they get home, and then they're like trying to throw dinner together. The kids have sports and after school activities and homework and things like, when do you grab that time with kids? It's really, really hard. So, when we talk about creating that space for them, we need to think about time first. Like, when are we going to do this? How do we do this? Like, when are we all at home at the same time, or, even in the same room at the same time? So thinking about that first and making that an inviting space. And I talk all the time with parents about dinner time. Dinner time has to be a priority in your home. 2 to 3 nights a week makes a huge difference. And I'm not talking dinner like, it has to be big and fancy and everything. Just get everybody around the table. And if it's not dinner time, make it Saturday morning, pancakes or French toast for breakfast or whatever. Food will get the teens to the table. So bring them to the table however you can. But, it really, one of the phrases I always use is listen to learn, not to lecture. Because when we sit down and calm down, and we're all guilty of this, adults too, we're already formulating the answer to somebody or a response to somebody before they finish their sentence. We're like, oh, this is what I'm going to tell them. Stop that noise in your head and say, what can I learn from my kiddo right now? What is the one thing I can do? Don't give them a lecture, because everybody shuts down if someone starts to lecture you, but just calm yourself down and say, what can I learn right now? Listen to learn. That's, if you don't do anything else, walk away from anything else from this right now, that's the phrase I want you to focus on, is listen to learn. Be really aware of your 3 pathways of communication. And so much of this is what I teach my couples, and then they turn around and use it with their kids and their family too. So, we need to talk about those 3 pathways. It's the words that we're using, our body language, and the tone of voice. And we're quick to pick up if our kid starts getting sassy with us, and we're like, don't use that tone of voice with me. Don't be snarky with me. What tone are we using? We need to think about that. And is the tone that we're using matching the words that we're using? If we're trying to be empathetic and kind, but yet we're being, we've got a little bite to our responses to the kids, it's going to shut them down. And kids are really, really intuitive when we talk about body language. They will watch our body language, read our body language, and go, oh, now's not the time to have this conversation with them. So think about your body language. And Tracy, one of the things when I teach my workshops, I always have parents just sit and cross their arms really tight while they're sitting with me. And I say, okay, I want you to take a deep breath and open your arms, palms up. And this is the palms up technique I learned from active parenting. When you open your body language up to the kids, they're willing to come into the space. If you're closed and tight, or if you're busy on your computer, or if you're busy on your phone or whatever, they're going to say, Mom and Dad's not listening right now. So why should I bother? So making space for them to come into your space and be in their space too. Show up at their activities. Don't over include yourself, but just be available. Be available to them so that they know that they can, there's that openness between the two of you to come and go. And show that you're listening. How many of us are half listening and we're texting as we're, kind of having a conversation with our spouse or whatever, or we're, the TV's on in the background. Close off all of the nonsense and all of the noise and really tune into your kid when they're coming to talk to you, because when you're available for the small stuff, they'll come to you for the big stuff too.
Yes, I love that. And I think it's that whole being present. And
Yes.
and I think it's so funny because you're right. Like as parents, we get so annoyed. Oh, my spouse on their phone all the time, my kids on their phone all the time. They're always playing video games. They're always doing all the things. But then when our kids come to us and we're doing those things, we don't even see it. We're like, yeah, right. Okay. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I like to think of it in the professional setting. I want parents, would we do that if we're talking to our boss? Would we do
So
that
true.
if we're, in a networking event or having with this, we're sitting there with grandma and she's telling us her life story. We're not going to be distracted. We're going to be in that moment. But why don't we do it with our kids?
Yeah.
And I'm guilty of it too. And honestly, I've even shunned my son a few times. He's tried to come talk to me like, no, I'm busy right now. I can't
Mm-hmm.
talk to you right now. When he's like, I want to talk. Like, I'm ready to talk to you about this.
Yeah.
Bedtime's a big one for him. And I've had to catch myself because I'm like, you need to go to sleep. Mom needs to go decompress. Like I need my decompress before I go to bed. You need to go to sleep. But that's like he's like, Mom, can you stay in the room? And I want to talk to you. And it's like nothing crazy. It's just like, so I did this here. He'll be like, so how was your day today? And he's 10. And it just cracks me up because I'm like, it's so easy to be like, dude, I got time for this. You need to go to bed. And having the tone and getting frustrated. And so I've really been trying to work on that because it starts to close those doors. And then when he is a teenager, he's gonna be like, well, Mom doesn't have time for me. Mom doesn't want to talk to me.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
love that. And I love the dinner table aspect because that has become very lost in our society today. I feel like I know growing up, every single night we had dinner together. There was no ifs, ands, or buts. There were no phones at the table. There were no any of that stuff. It was, this is dinner time.
Yes,
Spending time together.
absolutely.
Sometimes we'd watch TV if we're watching a movie together, but a lot of time it was just like, hey, how was your dance? Well, we would have those conversations about school and things going on. So I love that you bring that into this because I think that is so important for families to be like, make the time. Like this
Yes.
is your kids. And I read a statistic, and maybe you know the statistic. They talked about, from the time they're born until the time they're like 18, you've already spent like 75% of the time with them that you will ever spend with them. And I was like, oh, what?
Yes. Yeah. And I can vouch it's true because once they're adults and they're out of the house, you see them, for an occasional dinner together, or it's a phone call here and there, but they're busy adulting and doing their life. So they're like, oh, I remember when I moved from Indiana here when we got married, it was once a week on Mondays. I would, this is back in the day when you had to pay for long distance phone calls. So that's how old I am. But I remember Monday was my day, to call Mom and Dad and just check in and see like how's everybody back home and things like that. I treasured those moments because it was like, this is the only time I have to connect because I have 3 kids and life is crazy. So making that time to connect with your kids when they come to you is super important because once they're out, they're out.
Yep.
So yeah, and you need to grab the time while you still have them under the roof.
Yes, exactly. And I think like you said, that whole safe space to open that door for communication is active listening and being present with them. I mean, I love that. Just like listening to what they're having to say, not jumping in with solutions or fixes or any of that stuff unless they need that. So I
Yes,
love that.
I'm glad that you said that because that was one of the things I wanted to bring up because something I have to work on with my couples all the time is, you know, Men tend to like to problem solve. Women like to just commiserate or just share and rant and get things off their chest. They're not necessarily looking for a solution. They're just like, I just got to tell you this thing, get it off my chest. I had to do this within my own marriage. But what I teach my couples all the time, and I teach this with parents and their kiddos, is ask first. Do you just need to vent and get this off your chest? Or are we going to problem solve? Because I need to know what mindset you need from me before I go into this. And then ask open-ended questions. Super important, like, what did you do next? Or can you tell me more about that? Keep them talking so you get more information, because at some point in time you can say to them, well, would you like my suggestions? Or do what ideas do you have? You'll get to that problem solving stage, but you need to know going into the conversation what your kid needs from you. Sometimes they just need that time to connect, like your son at bedtime. He's like, now's my time, let's chat. So
Yes, exactly. And I love that. I think that is so powerful to like those questions of asking, do you need this? Like, well, before we get into this, what are you looking for? Because I struggle with my marriage too, where I'm like, I just need to get this on my chest. I already know the solution. I'll need you to tell me the solution. Like, let's just
I just need to vent.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. No, I think that is so powerful to be able to just ask questions. Like that's what in communication, like what do you need right in this moment? Yes, I love that. That is amazing. And it's funny because people probably heard those things like with their spouses or whatever, like, hey, ask question, but we don't do with our kids. Our kids are humans too. I think we sometimes put them on this level because like, oh, they're our kids. They're important to us, of course. Like we love our kids and all these things, but we're still putting work or this or that or over our kids or our phones or whatever. And I think just saying, okay, what do you need in this moment from me? And treating them like an adult and ask those questions to them.
And sometimes they'll say, I don't know. And
Mhm.
that's okay. If they don't know, that might mean that they're struggling with a lot of big feelings. They don't have the words to put, they're like, I know my body feels tense. I know I don't feel good, or I'm very upset, but I don't know exactly how to explain this to you. So you may ask, what do you need? And they'll be like, I don't know, or they may be emotional and do you need a hug? Do you need some space? Do you want me to just sit next to you for a little bit? Or, do you want to go take a walk? One of the things with preteens and teens, especially our teens, we need to, with our little kids, we can do face to face. We call it belly button to belly button. So you're really facing them and, eye contact. If you've got littles, sit on the floor so you're closer eye contact with them. I used to pop my kids up on the countertop, and be like, all right, tell me what's going on. So they didn't feel like they were talking up at me and I was talking down at them. Teens get a little weird sometimes about that. And they're like, I don't want to look at you, especially if it's bigger topics. They're like, I can't look at you and have this conversation. Have those conversations in the car while you're driving, because then no one's looking at anybody, or take a walk with them where you're shoulder to shoulder. So you shift from belly to belly to shoulder. And when you have that walk with them, or you're shooting hoops with them, or so they don't feel like you're judging them because you're looking at them, that make it a little easier for them. One of my kids likes to cook, and that would be when I would get those conversations from him. He'd be chopping vegetables and mixing stuff and that's when we would have our conversations, because he was kind of, on the surface, he was focusing on his cooking and stuff, but then he was also sharing his day with me too. So, teens sometimes need us to step away from the eye to eye and into the shoulder to shoulder conversations. Then they'll open up a little bit more. So
I love that, because it's funny because I like on the career readiness side, when I'm working with people, it's like, oh, we are teaching how to have eye contact, because teenagers a lot, especially these days, do struggle with that. They get very like, oh, I'm going to talk down here. I'm not going to look at you. But in this setting, it makes total sense where, okay, they want to be able to open up to you, but that eye contact could be intimidating. It could be scary. It could be embarrassing. It could be whatever. And so, yeah, I love that. Like, especially in the walk. And to me, it's like a visual of, okay, like you're on a walk, you're partnering together, you're partners. Yes. And that's like, you're partnering with your kids, supporting them in that sense. So I love that. So here's a fun one. And I want to dig into this because I think this is a big struggle parents have, especially these days, is how, and this is like, I think a big one for communication. How should parents approach initiating difficult or sensitive conversations with their teenagers, such as topics related to relationships, mental health, substance abuse, even, sex, those types of things, because those are really important conversations that parents need to be having with their kids that I think a lot of parents haven't. And so then we see teens struggling with this stuff, or it's not being taught in schools. Like sex ed's not taught hardly in school anymore. It's kind of like, oh, they do a little puberty demo or talk about video, and then that's it. So if you're not having these conversations at home, these kids don't understand this stuff, but it's also a really uncomfortable topic for
So
you and your
uncomfortable.
kid. So how do you approach those difficult conversations?
Yeah. Especially if there's been some conflict in there, I always tell parents, make sure you know your end goal in mind. Are you wanting this conversation to be educational? Are you trying to gather information? Because something, and this was when our daughter started high school. This one, we were sitting and eating dinner, and all of a sudden she pops off and she goes, "Did you know that kids go to smoke weed at the ravine?" Like in the middle of dinner. And I'm like, "Excuse me?" She goes, "Yeah." So that was my opportunity to gather more information, and it's like, well, how do you know this? And so then we started, but again, we were at the dinner table, so it was a really relaxed conversation. But at the same point in time, the mommy brain is screaming, "She's 14. Why does she know this?" Because that's so not my kids. So that kind of freaked me out a little bit. So know your end goal in mind before you go in. Like if you want to do conversations about, relationships and things like that, are you going in because you want to find out where they're at in, the boy girl relationship or whatever? Or are you just like, hey, you might be having some feelings about some of the people in your social circle. So are we educating them on how to handle these things, or are we trying to gather the information first? So, and then you already brought this up. I'm going to talk a little bit about talk time. Know your kids' talk time. Do not spring these big conversations on them, like in the middle of whatever else they're doing. Make sure that it's a time where everybody's calm, everybody's relaxed. Go in with kind of an outline in mind of the topics because if you're already flustered going into the conversation, it's not going to go well. So go in with a little, outline of what you definitely want to cover with your kiddo. Ask a lot of open-ended questions. What do you know about her? Hey, I saw, if you want to take it away from them, but you still want to know where they're at on something, you can ask them like, hey, I saw on the news that they were talking a lot about this thing, whatever the topic is that you're worried about. When they were talking to kids at a high school in California about this thing, and do you guys talk about that at school? Like what's going on at your school that you've heard through the grapevine kind of thing? Or I've heard from another mom that this thing happened at school. Do you know anything about it? And just kind of open the line of communication, and just no judgment. I'm just kind of wondering if you even heard about that this was going on. Leave it so that you're not making any judgments or anything like that. We're just here's the conversation that we're going to have. So talk time is so important though, because you cannot spring these hard conversations on your kids. You need to know when they're most relaxed and most open. Some kids like to talk in the morning, some kids like to talk in the evenings, whatever. So know your kid before you start doing this conversation.
Yeah, I love it. It's kind of that, I like that aspect of coming to them in a sense of curiosity, not like judgment,
Yes.
not like, oh my gosh, I heard this today. Is that true? Like, just like, so what's going on? I do that with my son sometimes, again, because he's 10, but he's had crushes. And so we like to like mess with him, but it's in a fun way. And he like gets all like, whatever about it, but he'll talk to us about it because we approach it that way. It's very comfortable for him. We're just like, so how's so-and-so doing? And just stuff like that, where it's not hardcore serious conversations yet. But I think having that, and he'll come and say, well, I don't like this girl anymore, mom. I like this girl now. And he'll just like come to me and tell me those things because we've had that non-judgment, just like,
Yeah.
whatever. And like, and we make a joke of it too. Like, okay, we like kissing. It's like, oh no, you aren't allowed to kiss no girl till you're 18. Like, and he knows that we're just messing with him. But I think again, knowing your kid, that style of communication that they have, and when those conversations can be had, and I think, I'm sure you'd agree with this too, if it's not prodding, we're not poking at them to get information. Let's say, hey, I don't know where you're at with this. And even I think in the educational side, if we're having hard conversations about uncomfortable topics, even if your kid's kind of sitting there quiet and they're not giving anything, they might be just processing, and they might come later with you. Or you could just say, hey, listen, I just want to talk about this with you. And even if you're kind of like, hey, here's all the stuff about this that I want you to know, and here's how to be safe. I'm
Yeah.
here if you have questions, if you want to talk about this anytime. We've told my son that, as they had the puberty conversation last year, and we've had to talk about some of the things because he was going into middle school this year.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I'm like, I don't want you to learn this stuff from kids. So I told him, I'm like, anytime you have questions about this stuff, we will answer it.
Hmm.
And so he has come to us and been like, so what's this? And even when it's like, oh, and even if it's like, I don't want to talk about this right now. Like, I don't want to talk about this right now, but he does. And he's asking. So it's saying, all right, let me just stop what I'm doing, take a second, or say, hey, buddy, right now is not the best time. Can we talk about this in an hour or this time? Let me get done with this first. Cause maybe it's like, I've changed the baby's diaper. Probably not the best time to talk about the subject. And he's
Right.
like, yes, okay, that's great. So, because I think that is something that a lot of parents just don't have, because it is uncomfortable and they
Yeah.
don't know how to approach it. And so then their kids start experimenting with things or going to their peers to learn about it. And that's not the best place to get the information.
No, definitely not. Yeah, the playground, the school bus, those are not, no, those are not reliable sources of information for sure. And just letting your kid know if you ever have any questions, even if it feels uncomfortable. I had one family who it was those topics were hard topics for everybody to dance around. So they started a question box. So the kids could write a question on a post-it note and stick it in there. And then that's when the conversations, were brought up. So they'd be like, hey, someone posted a question in the question box about vaping. So let's, what questions do you guys have? And they did it as a whole. They had 4 kids. So they were like, so what all do you guys know about vaping? And then they just kind of took it from whatever level the kids were, and then they went a little bit further. But that way the kids didn't feel like they were being targeted for that conversation. It was just a family topic. So,
That's
and the
awesome.
kids knew that they could put anything they wanted in the box.
That's awesome. And I think that's something that, because there are a lot of parents there's parents, I think, that go both directions. They go extreme on like the hands off, and then they go extreme on the hands on. And sometimes that overprotective, or, oh my gosh, I don't want my kid to get pregnant, so we're going to make this as a no-go. And it's like, well, no, you got to keep that open communication going.
Yeah.
I'm not saying you say, hey, here's the things, and I'm going to support them. I'll give you your bedroom and you can have your boyfriend, your girlfriend over. No, I'm not saying extreme, but
No.
keeping that open communication of, it is a safe place to come talk to me about any topic you have. Even if, like you said earlier, the mom brain's going like, I want to lecture you on this right now and tell you all the things not to do. But that's where we kind of have to stop ourselves as the adult and have that conversation with our kids. Otherwise, they're not going to come talk to us about things.
Absolutely. The other thing that this phrase popped into my head, when I work with my couples, we do this building your family foundation. So your vision, values, and goals, which every couple needs to work on. And I have a whole process for that. But at the end of that, they come out with a statement, and it says, in our family. In our family, these are the things we believe in. These are the things that, we hold true. So when you have those values already set for your family, then the kids are raised with that too. And then when they come in, inevitably every teenager will come to their parent at some point in time. Well, my friend gets to do this. Well, my friend gets to do that. I get that. And that's what their family decided on. In our family, you're not allowed to do this because XYZ. And in that way, this is our family belief. This is our family values. And these are the things we're trying to instill in you. And here's the reason why. Don't just tell them and no. And here's the reason why. And then that way they can, they can accept it without a whole lot of rebel. I mean, they may not love you for it, but at the same point in time, they're going to be like, well, at least she has a reasonable reason for setting those boundaries. Like she's not just saying it just to be mean. So, and I think that helps too. So when you know those values that you want your kids to be raised in and talk about them all the time, just as part of the natural conversation at home, then they know when they start struggling with these topics, they're going to be like, oh, but in our family, this is how we're approaching it. So it gives them that fall back on too, for them as they make those decisions.
Yeah, I love that. And I think, again, it's treating them like an adult. Well, here's why I said no instead of being why I said no, because I'm your parent.
Yes.
because I'm the boss and you're not.
Yes.
And it's like, yes, that is true, but we don't have to say that to our kids. They know that. They know those
Yes.
things. That just reminds me of like this situation with my son. So he plays video games and we limit them a lot because in our family, I am like, nope.
Yeah.
You're not gonna consume your life with video games because it's not healthy for you, family time, outside, all the stuff. And so one of the games we will not let him play is Fortnite. And I'm very strict on the types of games. And some parents are like, and that's fine. Again, I don't care what your friends are doing and stuff, but he actually came to me. He had to do a research report at school. And so he's like, so mom, it was like an opinion article or basically like get research to support your idea or your reasoning. And so he went and did all this research on the benefits of Fortnite and he brought that to me. And it was a great conversation because he didn't bring it to me like, well, so-and-so says it. And he was like, so mom, can I talk to you about something I did at school? And I'm like, well, sure. And he's like, so I know you don't like Fortnite and I know that you still might not let me play, but I found some evidence on why it is a good game to play. And I'm like, well, awesome. Let me hear it. And so we had a great conversation about that. At the end of the day, it was still like, well, I love that you did this and this was awesome. But here's my reasoning why, and for you specifically, why we don't play that game. And he was like, okay. And like, he just has accepted that and he understood it. But we were able to have this conversation. And I told him, like, always do that. If there's
Yes.
something that, I mean, I am happy for you to go do research. I mean, that's a huge life skill to be able to go prove your point and say, hey, I want to back up and have this evidence on why I should get to do this or why I should get to do these things. It doesn't always mean that it's going to happen, but bring that to me because I might be able to say, you know what, you did this very well and you thought this out very thoroughly. And I've changed my thought on this. So I think that is such a good skill to have, especially when you look at the world we're in with politics. Nobody
Yes.
wants to have those open conversations. And if we
Right.
can teach our kids to be like, yes, bring me your evidence. And sometimes you can change somebody's mind and sometimes you can't. And that's okay too. So
Yeah.
but I love that. I love that. And so it just reminded me of that situation that just happened a couple weeks ago with him. And I was like super impressed. And I'm like, all right, buddy, like, nice.
Yeah. Well, and I like that because it's teaching him at an early age to be a critical thinker. And we're not doing that. I hear this time and again, we're not doing that enough in the schools. We're having them regurgitate to pass the state tests or the whatever tests, but we're not teaching them to be critical thinkers. And when we take that skill to that next level for them, it's not just an assignment at school. It's a conversation for how I can maybe, tell mom and dad, this is what I'm thinking, this is why I'm thinking it, without all the drama and the emotions and the, storming up the steps and the slamming of doors. It's like, well, no, here, this is why I believe this is the right thing. And what a great skill, because when they go off to college, then they're going to be less influenced by all of the nonsense happening, on campus, because they'd be like, whoa, hold on a minute, let me think through this and think through it logically. Kudos to you for being open for him to come to you and say that too, because most kids would be like, well, mom's not going to care anyway. So kudos for opening that conversation and saying, yeah, I want to hear it. I want to hear it. I want you to do more of this. I'm just going to applaud you on that one.
Well, thank you. I was impressed. I was like, okay, I must be doing something right. This is great. And he was nervous. He was definitely like, well, like, I don't know if you're going to like it. And I'm like, dude, just like, let's hear it. Like, I want to hear about what you got to say. And so it was a great thing. And I mean, it's helped, which we have a really good relationship anyways, but he does come to that stuff. So I was like, so excited about it. I'm like, yes, this is great.
That is great.
So this brings me to the next question, because I think this is another area that's really challenging. And honestly, this is probably the ultimate area outside of uncomfortable conversations is discussing boundaries, expectations, but also dealing with that conflict. Because teenagers, they are, like you said, the hormones are crazy. They sometimes get lippy, they get mad, they're slamming doors, and that triggers us as parents. And it's like, how do you manage those things to still keep that communication going? Maybe not right in that moment, but to not damage the relationship, I guess, when those moments happen.
Yeah. First thing, and I will, because I was not great at this, take a deep breath first. Like when you feel it starting to ramp up, you need to step away, take a breath and think like, all right. And even if your brain is screaming, oh, for the love of Pete, here we go again. take a deep breath, because if your kid is starting to ramp up and then you ramp up, you're just going to everybody's going to keep ramping it up. So someone has to be the adult in the room to say, hold on, wait a minute here. It might be like you said, I can't do this right now, but I am happy to talk to you in a half hour about this. My parents would sometimes say, you know what? Everybody's mad right now. Let's take the night. Everybody think about this, and we'll come back in the morning and revisit this. Or my dad, one time, I don't remember, one of my siblings, he was having, it wasn't an argument per se, but he was like, you know what? I think we both need to cool off right now, and then we'll come back to this. So, and that's teaching your kid too that, just because you're in conflict with someone doesn't mean that it needs to be ramped up to a whole drama thing. Sometimes we do just need to take a deep breath and say, hold on a minute. Like, this is not, we're both getting wound up and, riled up about it. Let's just take a breath. Let's figure this out, how we can do this. I have this thing, it's called the listening filter, that I teach my couples. We start with, if you think about a funnel, so you think about the top part of the funnel, it's the stories we tell ourselves when something's going, not the way we planned on it. So it's like, oh God, here we go. Do I always have to argue with this kid? Why can't this kid, just do things because I told him or her to? So we start telling ourselves stories about, oh God, here we go again. And then we start filtering down a little bit into our feelings. So the feelings are like, oh man, so now the heart's starting to race and you're starting to get, tense. And so now we're telling ourselves stories about, here we go again, and it's going to be another fight. And I dread talking to this kid, over this stuff. Now I'm all mad and I'm all worked up. What's the smallest part of the funnel? It's the actual facts that are happening right now. And what we need to ask ourselves is, what do I know for sure right now? Like, so what is it that this kid needs right now? And that's something that we need to think about and ask ourselves, because our kids, especially teens, they're so wound up with hormones and bodily changes and everything else, social changes that are going on, and all of the chaos in the outside world, that they're a little discombobulated when they come to us. So we need to be the ones to say, okay, what are the facts? What do we know for sure about this kid? And then ask, what does this kid need right now? Sometimes our child just needs our attention, and they'll come at us for either negative or positive attention, so they just want your attention. They want that time with you. Sometimes they're pushing for independence and you're not willing to give it yet. And that's that push pull that every parent and teen goes through. It's like, oh, I want to give them some rope, but yet I know I need to keep them safe. So, how do I keep them safe and still let them start wandering, the roads? And that's a hard one for everybody, but we need to ask ourselves, is my child looking for independence? Is he trying to start making some decisions for himself and kind of asking me permission, but kind of asking me to stay out of it, because sometimes they want to be adults and they want to do this adulting thing, but yet they're like, but adulting sucks and it's hard and I still want to be a kid, like, I mean, there's grown-up days where we're like, I still just want to go back to being a kid.
Yes.
And we can ask ourselves that, like, is he struggling with that? I want to be an adult, but I still want to be a kid. Is that where, this child's feeling a little unequal in his balance? Our kids don't realize the life-changing decisions they're making. They see it as a decision I'm making for today, and who cares 3 years from now or 5 years from now? Or, we talked with the coalition that I volunteer with, we talk about kids and vaping all the time, and they're like, oh, but it's not that bad. But the science is telling us that continually putting that stuff in your lungs long term is really bad. But in the moment they're like, I'm just hanging out with my friends, it's not that big of a deal, kind of thing. So that's where we need to, again, take a deep breath and go, okay, is this an educational moment for us? And one other thing, revenge, when we talk about the 4 reasons that kids misbehave, the last one is revenge. Like, we may have told them no about something 2 days ago and they're still stewing about it. We're so past it, like, we're not even aware that it's still sitting with them, but your kid may still be honked off and mad at you about it. So whatever it is you're talking about right now might not actually be what the fight's all about. It might be something that they're still mad at you about from 2 days ago that you're not even aware of. So sometimes they're like, oh no, she told me no, and then my friends made fun of me, and blah, blah, blah. So this is sitting, so I'm like, so I'm gonna get her now. They get that revenge and they start saying very mean things to us. When our kids say things like, I hate you and you're the worst mom ever, and I'm gonna go live with somebody else because you're a terrible parent, that's just revenge words because they're frustrated and they don't mean it. They're just in that heat of the emotions and the heat of the moment. And, so often they're like, I don't know what to say because I don't know how to express what I'm feeling. So I'm just going to say mean things. So, so again, we have to be the adult in the room, which is so hard because it's so easy to get ramped up into the emotions, that emotion stage of the funnel too. So, set the example early on conflict resolution. If you can start doing that when they're little, like, look, I can see you're really mad about this. Let's have a conversation before it gets, ugly. If you can start that early on and teach them that self-regulating early on, then you won't have as many conflicts later on, which I'm watching my daughter do that with her daughter too. And it's hilarious because now Emma will be like, I just need a deep breath. Like she's just like, she's 3.5 and she'll just be like, you'll just see her just lion, they call it lion's breath. She'll do a lion's breath if she's feeling frustrated, which when we can teach our kids to self-regulate early, we're not going to have as many conflicts with them as teenagers because they're learning to handle those emotions, those big emotions. So yeah, and that was a lot. But going back to really the overall theme of we have to be the adult in the room. We need to pull the temperature down when it starts rising. If we can do that, and even if that means I'm really upset with you right now, and we both need a break, and I will talk to you in a half hour. Go to your separate rooms, everybody calm down, come back again. So, and come back to the table. Those are, that was a lot of information, but those are those little things that we need to think about. Like, what does my kid need from me at this moment? That's the question that we need to ask.
Yes. And I think that it's so important too, like you said, with being the adult. And by doing that, you're also setting the example. So if you go off and blow your top, of course your kid's going to do that because they see you do those things. If you start to regulate, or you say, hey, guess what? I am very angry and upset right now. And it could have been not even with your kid. It could have been a situation at work, but you being able to show them and express that, say, I am very mad right now. I need a minute to decompress, to catch my breath, to kind of focus and, cool down a little bit. Then they're going to see, wow, okay, mom and dad got really mad about this situation, but this is how they reacted. So when my friend at school or my teacher makes me really angry, this is how I can react. And it's showing them those same things. And I think a lot of the time we as parents get mad because our kid, the way they react to us or to other people, but we're like, well, but let's look in the mirror for a second. How do we react to those things? Because in all honesty, they're probably doing what we do. And when we're not taking a breath or we're screaming back at them, okay, fine. Like, then let me call somebody right now and you can leave if you want. Like, that's not doing anything. Just like, okay, all right, cool. Like, let me know when your bags are packed if that's really what you want to do. But I'm here for you. And I mean, I still love you and this, that, and the other. And I think sometimes they're kind of like, well, I don't really want to leave. Like, wait a minute.
Right.
It's just kind of like, you're just like, all right, like if that's what you want to do, if that's what's going to make you feel better. And then they're like, wait a minute, but no, and it's like, well, that's what you said. And then it's in that conversation of a great learning tool. Well, we probably shouldn't say things when we don't mean them.
Yes.
So, there's a lot to that. And I think that we could talk about that for hours and hours, because I think that conflict piece is so massive in teenagers, and how we can, as adults, manage our emotions to show our kids is crucial in that aspect, for sure, of being, because we can tell them all day long, but if we're not showing that, they're not going to listen.
Absolutely.
So I love that. I think that's great. That aspect there. So, I know we, like I said, we go, and we're going to probably have Amy back on again, and we're going to just keep talking about this stuff, because we can talk about this stuff all the time. And there's so many good, beneficial things in this. But Amy, what else would you want to share with your parents before we kind of wrap up this episode? Like what are the tips or tricks or things? I know we have some resources that are going to be in the show notes for you guys, so definitely check those out. But what else would you want to kind of tell parents about communicating with their teenagers?
A couple of things. Remember that they are learning and growing. They're in a stage, our toddlers, they start doing massive steps, in growth, and then they kind of everything evens out for a little bit. Your kids as preteens and teens are hitting another one of those big spurts. So remember, they're learning, they're growing, they're trying to figure things out, but they're figuring out bigger things that they had to before. So they're struggling a little bit with that too. Space and grace as they go through this. Sometimes that's what we need to do, is give everybody a little space, a little grace through it all. Listen with everything you've got. When your kid comes to you, you put down the phone, you turn off the TV, you do whatever you need to do to establish that I am here for you right now. I'm listening right now. Get that one-to-one time in with your kids. And I know it's hard. Everybody's busy, 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 but that one-to-one time might even be the 10-minute drive from your house to the school. I did that with all of my kids. I drove them back and forth to school because that was my time where I was one-to-one with them. And I'm like, all right, so what's your day looking like, before you go to school? So get that one-to-one time and show interest in their interests. I hate video games, not good at them. There's too many buttons on the controller kind of thing, but our youngest was all about it. And he was a big Lego kid too. So we would do Legos together, which I love because I love puzzles. But he also was a Star Wars fan. So the one video game I would play with him was the Star Wars Lego game because the characters were hilarious because, the way Princess Leia would just kind of wiggle as she walked in the whole thing. So we would just goof around and do that. As much as I don't like video games, I would do that with him. So kind of get yourself in there a little bit. Remember family dinners. We have seen through the research that family dinners make a huge difference in academic skills. We see it in their conversational skills, their social skills. You will find that relaxed time to have those family conversations will make a huge difference because your voice will be in your kid's head even after they leave the dinner table. And it could be, it doesn't have to be serious stuff either. In fact, I just started a series on Fridays on Instagram and LinkedIn. You can find me there under my name. But I have a series of Friday dinner time talks. So, and I call it Talk Time, a recipe for connection. And it's just goofy questions like, if you were a superhero, what superpower would you have, and who would you help with it? So it just gets the kids talking about, silly off the wall kind of things, but yet we're practicing our communication skills. So just get in there and make yourself present. The more present you are, the better it is for your kiddos.
Yes, I love that. And I think those are all phenomenal tips. I mean, and it's like one of those things that we don't have to always implement them all at once because that's hard. But like start with one thing. And then once that one's going great, add another one. And eventually, even if you don't have, I feel like, and tell me if I'm wrong in this, but I feel like even if you don't have the best relationship with your kid right now, especially if they're a teenager and it's just a lot of conflict and head banging and head butting, but if you start to implement these things and showing them that you're there and that you're present and that you care and, honoring them and respecting them, that relationship is going to start to turn around. It may not be perfect and might not be immediately, but you're going to start to notice changes. And because I know there's parents that are like, man, I've ruined it. I'm too late. Me and my kid don't get together and It's like, no, it's never too late. It's never too late.
No, definitely not. One other thing, and I sent you a list of really good books that you can add to the show notes, and I love them all. But one I forgot to put on there, and I would recommend to everybody, is The 5 Love Languages, because if you understand your child's love language, it's so easy to connect with them. So knowing both your love language and your child's love language, that will probably open up some of the conflict areas into a better communication because you're now communicating in a language that they accept and they take in. So 5 Love Languages needs to be added to that list. I'm sorry I didn't add it at that point, but the list that I gave you, Tracy, are some of my favorites. And Josh Shipp, if anyone's raising kids and you're not following Josh, you need to follow Josh Shipp because he's hilarious and he totally gets teens. Like, he totally gets teens. So he's a great resource.
That's awesome. Yes. And I would even add to on that of tools is the DISC assessment for communication, especially because it's also another one of those love languages than DISC. I think if you could do both of those and learn those styles for your kids and for even your spouse, like everybody that's in your family, honestly, your communication is going to go like significantly up, because you're going to now know, how does this person communicate? How do they take this stuff? You know, what do they see as love? I mean, all the things. So I think that's awesome. But I mean, this was amazing, Amy. It was a great conversation. Again, I would love to have you back so we can talk even more. And so thank you. Yes, thank you so much for all the valuable insights, the experience, the, you know, the trainings, the tools, all the things. Everybody, make sure you go follow her. Her links will be in the show notes. So you can LinkedIn, Facebook, check her out. Keep, you know, follow her. She gives great videos and tutorials, all the things. If you're really struggling, you need some one-on-one support, I'm sure Amy would be happy to help you. And I know she's got some great programs out there. So again, thank you so much for being here. And we just can't thank you enough.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed it.